There's this like pressure to be perfect, I think.
It can be debilitating, like your mental health affects your physical health.
Kids today have way more challenges than when we grew up.
And so just talk to your kids and just like listen.
And I don't think everyone should add on everyone has their flaws.
Welcome to Listen, a conversation about mental health and teens. I'm Dustin Lukey. During this Mental Health Awareness Month, we're taking a closer look at and listen to what kids are experiencing, especially given the effects of the pandemic. In fact, children's mental health was declared a national emergency this past year. So we sat down with local teens and professionals to see what kids are feeling and how adults can offer a healthy support.
There's this like pressure to be perfect, I think. And this idea of being like the perfect person is kind of what society puts on you. Like you see on social media, like the perfect girl, the perfect guy, like all of this. But like it's not reality.
I definitely say we have a lot more to worry about, especially like in our future and near future even. We have a lot of decisions to make, like where we should go to college or like what we should do. And if that thing, like the thing that we enjoy is going to support us, and just a lot of things to worry about.
We know from our data that over almost 30% of kids say that they are at risk for depression.
I had a lot of anxiety, mostly about school stuff, but then like once I got to college especially, it just heightened. And then I like talked to my friends and stuff, and I was like, okay, so it's not just me. Like everybody else is kind of having these worries and these fears too.
You know, everybody has their own way that they handle things, and I think, you know, the time that we're living in right now, it's re-engaging, it's getting back to what's normal, and I don't think it'll ever be normal again. So what does that look like? And I think that everybody's had their own experience, and that's okay. It's hard for them to deal with and handle, and they have to do it at their own pace, and that's important.
Is it a teen that's just struggling with, hormones and normal stresses, or is it becoming something that's more worrisome that we need to call attention to? And
it doesn't necessarily have to be persistent anxiety every single day. It can be like one day you're being anxious about something like a test or a presentation, but just because you're not dealing with some like long-term mental illness, that doesn't diminish what you're going through. That doesn't make it any less difficult than anybody else. Like if you're really anxious one day and not anxious another day, that doesn't mean that you can't like be struggling just because you don't have like a diagnosis or you're not in therapy, you're not medicated. That doesn't make your struggles any less than somebody who is.
I was a senior in 2020, so I got my senior year cut off, so it sucked, it really did. But not knowing what the future holds, and then like having so much pressure on these kids for being in school or coming to work every day. I've noticed a lot of it is like struggling in school and going back to school from being online and kind of that social aspect. I think that a lot of people struggled with getting back together and being around a lot of people, and then obviously from going from online school to in-person school, it was a difficult jump for them.
I mean, as we came through the pandemic and you look at just some of the different challenges that adults are having, and the kids not being with their peers, being outside of school, coming back to that environment, dealing with things like social media, all the tough things that it takes to be a young person these days. And it's okay for them to need help at times too.
Prior to the pandemic, 48% of kids in La Crosse County said that they struggle with anxiety.
I think a lot of people think that just because we're back in school in person, everything's back to normal. With the pandemic, obviously we were online and everything was changing, so we had a lot of extra support, and teachers were kind of being really generous and like really flexible with everything, and we were having like all of our deadlines and all that stuff put right in front of us where it was really easy to see. And now going back to school and like transitioning, it's like, oh, we're out of it, everything's back to normal, you should remember how to do this. But I don't think they really understand like the difference between going into high school, like your freshman year, and then coming back to school as a junior and going 2 years with all those like supports in place and all that like extra help and flexibility, and then having that all taken away, it can be really hard.
I wanted to be able to get out of the house and like see people, because like
In the pandemic, you couldn't really leave unless you were an essential worker, and McDonald's was still open, and I wanted to just like be out of the house. I wanted to see people and socialize because I really missed that part of like school and stuff because I didn't have that anymore.
Locked in the house like during the pandemic, just kind of in the house. Now it's like lockdown restrictions kind of lightened, and now we're just kind of out and about. And then with school and all, it's kind of anxious, just like a little sense of being like falling behind, getting everything back into the swing after like a year and a half of just having to be at home, just catching up.
It was a really weird experience learning like how important that like social interaction is, and like just really getting hit by it. Like you don't realize like how important that is, or like how much you want to see your friends. But yeah, we just like learned that it was really important, and we just took it for granted, and it affected us mentally in a bad way.
There's a lot, I think. I think there's lots of dealing with things on their own because they don't feel like they have those spaces to share. Lots of, at times, just not knowing how to handle emotions internally. So regulating self is something that's a struggle at times too.
Kids missed out on some really important years, during their development, and some of the social skills that, have typically been there with kids at certain ages are missing a little bit right now. So the environments that kids were in at times were not a safe environment, and I think there's parts that people just got used to that, and unfortunately there wasn't the modeling of behaviors at times that there should have been. So we got a lot of work to do. We got some recovery to do to just make sure that kids are getting some of that development that they missed out on.
So as you just heard, teen mental health struggles are a serious issue. Life for kids today cannot be compared to decades past. So we're now going to look at a unique challenge, having these conversations across different generations.
Growing up today is very different than when we grew up. And kids today have way more challenges within their environment, their access to what's happening in the world, their access to social media. When we grew up, an issue that happened at school, you could leave at school. And now follows kids home on their phone. They can't turn it off. They don't have, social media has been set up to keep kids connected, and that is impacting their mental health. And as parents, we need to be aware that those challenges and those stresses are real for them.
I think that's incredibly important to mention, because the same experiences that maybe I had at that time in my life are different now. And the maybe expectations of the adults in young people's lives need to be different as well.
There's definitely a difference between generations. I think they look at it as not real, not something that's going on, and I think we are kind of realizing that we're dealing with it. And then when we go to our parents, they're like, oh, that's not real. Like, you can't go through that. Because when they were that age, they didn't talk about it, and they don't even know if they're going through that, like personally, or if they ever have been. Because it's something that society has pushed down, it's something that we don't talk about or we don't look at.
They need to kind of, evaluate their own mental health first, and because that, that generation, I guess, depending on where the cutoff is, it still is like taboo to talk about mental health. Like sometimes in those generations, you don't talk about it. That's not something you talk about. Like mental health doesn't exist or whatever, which is not true. So I think a lot of adults nowadays need to take a step back and be like, okay, how's my mental health? Am I struggling with something? Am I even at a place to be able to help someone else? Am I at a place where I can help my own child? Do I need to help myself first, or kind of work together and do that? So
I think parents are apprehensive about asking or engaging because they have no idea what to do. And they shouldn't feel that way. You're going to go through it together with your child, and the first part is just letting them know that you're there for them and you're going to help them.
I think we're really quick to be like, we support mental health, we support mental health education, until it's not as clean as just like, oh, you're stressed about something or you're sad about something. Like when it really does get to the point where like you can't get out of bed, you don't want to see anyone, you just want to be by yourself. It can be debilitating, like your mental health affects your physical health. And then to not point that as being lazy and rude and like standoffish, like going to the root of it and addressing the cause and not the symptoms. I think that's what's really important. I think that's what as a community we have to say, whether or not we're committed to addressing mental health in all forms for all people, regardless of how they show that.
And so those adjustments really need to be made by the adults, right? And that's not always easy. I mean, because nobody always has the answers. And when you're looking at people who are struggling with mental health or just struggling with getting by in life at times, and we know being a teenager can be tough. We talked about, some of the things that teenagers need to deal with, some of these difficult problems just within our society today that teenagers are also dealing with. It's not easy.
And we kind of need like this, what we're doing right now. This is to reach out to the older generation, and like having that and telling them that it's real can really help us bring forth this campaign that we're putting out across like the globe, that like mental health is real and you need to know it.
We all want to believe that our kids are fine and that they're just going through normal teen things, but life today is a little bit more challenging. And so we do as parents need to recognize that and be there for our kids and understand that they have a more challenging, they're living in a more challenging environment, and just asking, are you okay? Really, are you okay? What can I do for you? That could be, allow that young person to recognize that you do want to listen and that you can listen and that you're okay with hearing, no, I'm not okay. I need help.
We asked each of the young people with whom we spoke how they would like the adults in their lives to address the topic of their mental health. Here's what they had to say.
I wish they knew that with something so personal like your own mental health, that although like parents and teachers, they kind of like to be like, you're a kid, you don't know as much as I do, you haven't been here as long as I have. With something so personal, it is something that kids really do know a lot about, because it's just knowing about yourself, and they're really the only ones that know truly what's going on. So kind of just giving them that space for them to be in control of the conversation and for them to be saying, this is what I'm going through and this is what I need, and the parents to not fight back with, oh, I don't think you need that. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. Just kind of giving them that space to talk to somebody without necessarily asking for help. Because if kids want help, they're going to ask for help at some point. So if they're not coming to you being like, I really need help with this, I need advice with this, then that's probably not what they want.
I wish that they knew that we're all gonna like make mistakes, and I think that they just need to be there to like guide us. We might not make the best decisions, we might make good decisions, but like having that supportive like person there to guide you through, not lecturing you, but being there for you and being supportive, I think is very important for people to know. And I don't think a lot of people have that person that they can turn to. So making parents more aware that you don't always have to lecture like your kids or teachers, you don't have to lecture. There's something deeper going on, and I don't think they realize that.
We asked over 100 kids like kind of these questions, like what can parents do? And overwhelmingly they said, listen, don't judge us. We are struggling. Don't try to fix us. Be prepared to listen to some ugly stuff, but just be there.
Someone to talk to, maybe also like help with like homework, maybe, or just someone to just hang around with. But a lot of it is just having the help or like the people available to help yourself up into that other spot, just being either right there at the point or just ahead.
Talking to other people that have similar experiences like me, so that they can understand that it's not just a me situation, it's like a lot of people situation. I guess like if they understood better, they would maybe be able to give better guidance.
Figure out how they're feeling about a situation and not just being blind to it and just not really truly understanding what is happening.
I think just start having more conversations about it. I think that's the simplest way to help, is just have a conversation about it with your teenagers or your younger kids that you're around. Just talk about it and talk about like different ways that you can help, or different ways that you can help each other out with that, how to like get through it. Because there's like a lot of different like situations, like a lot of different, everyone like deals with it differently. Individual mental health is a very like wide spectrum of different things that are going on. So I think the simplest way to help is just have conversations about it.
I think just talk to your kids. You know, don't always assume that they're fine or they're being dramatic, because a lot of the time that's not how it works. Is they're not just, being dramatic just because they can. They're struggling mentally. Like, your brain is developing at this age. There's a lot going on, and add on a pandemic and everything else going on in the world, and it makes life hard.
Now let's focus on what adults can do to support youth mental health. As the kids say, it's the little things that can make all the difference.
I think we get there by not only helping the child, but also helping the family unit. That needs to be a big part of even what a youth organization like ours is doing. We're working with kids on a daily basis, but we got to get to the parents. We got to get to that family unit. And if there's other ways that we can help, if there's other services that need to be provided, I think it's the community coming together and making sure that youth are taken care of, parents are taken care of, siblings are taken care of, and just making sure we're really focused on that family unit.
Parents especially need that education too. They need to take the initiative. Just try to learn, try to understand. Like, even if you don't understand, I don't know, just try. Because like I think that's all your teen would want, is just for you to try to understand.
Even if you think the issue is like silly or stupid, like definitely, you don't have to like think about what the issue is necessarily, but like where we're coming from. Like, is it a place of we need help, or we need to just talk to somebody? A lot of the times I feel like it's something that some of us need. But yeah, just understanding where we're coming from.
It's like no one really knows what's going on better than the kids themselves. So this is time for like the roles to switch and the kids to be like, I really do know the most about myself and what I'm going through.
They need more support. And I think as parents, we need to be able to recognize when they're struggling, if they're struggling, and just ask and be prepared to listen really in a non-judgmental way, and that not compare to, to when it was, what it was like when you were young, but to listen non-judgmentally and be able to offer supports that may be new to your family, whether it's providing access to therapy or just talking about it.
But it's also important for us to be mentors to other adults within the community, to look and see, like for me personally, what would I do for my own kids? Ask them questions, especially when it seems like maybe they're having a hard time. But then more importantly, listen.
In some ways, it's modeling. We need to model for our kids that we also are struggling with our mental health, and being open and saying, yeah, there are days where I'm not okay, and this is what I do to help my mental health. And I think being really proactive in teaching our kids their own coping skills, what works for them to build their mental wellness, practicing mindfulness, being able to set the phone down or set your screens down, and learning to take a deep breath. we didn't necessarily have to do that because we didn't have so much coming at us at one time. But learning those practices that help relieve stress, of getting outside, of playing a sport or learning a new hobby. Those are all ways that impact our mental health.
And so I think the adults recognizing that, validating the fact that, yeah, let's talk about this, and understanding, and not judgmentally either, just understanding that that young people need to be listened to. They need to know that adults care, and they need to really be able to count on those adults that are in their lives to just help them through the tough times. And sometimes that's just listening.
And that's hard to do. It's hard to be quiet. It's hard for me to be quiet at times, right? So, but you have to do that. You have to create a space for them to be able to talk to you and be available. And that's, never underestimate the power of the kitchen table or a car ride or a stop for ice cream. And you just have to listen. You don't even have to say anything. They just need to know that you're going to be there for them.
I think everyone has it, and I think labeling it can be really good to kind of like, this is what's happening and this is how I can move forward, before you kind of start like spiraling and being like, why am I feeling like this? Kind of giving it like, this is what's happening to me and these are the things I can do.
It takes a lot to ask for help. It really does. Nobody wants to do that because you're admitting something's wrong, and being able to reach out and look for help, it's a big deal.
If you know a kid or if you know a teen and you haven't checked in with them in a while, or you're wondering how they're doing, they're probably hoping that somebody will reach out. And so I think that that's one thing that that oftentimes may hold people back, is I don't know how this person will receive this, but you'd be surprised, I think. You'd be surprised at how often some things go left unasked. And so really developing a level of comfort to ask questions and to, really make yourself available. And even if it's not then in that moment, I find that it's also helpful to just remain available.
Sometimes we don't want to answer, we just want somebody to talk to.
And so just talk to your kids and just like listen when they tell you, hey, I'm upset about this, or hey, I'm struggling with this. Don't just dismiss it, listen to them. So yeah, that's really all you can do, and then help them get the help that they need.
If you or someone you know is struggling, please know that there are many local resources available. Great Rivers 211 is one simple number you can call. Just dial 211 and they will connect you to any local services you may need. We'd like to say a big thank you to the teens with whom we spoke and the organizations who collaborated with us on this topic. And thank you for watching Listen, a conversation on mental health and teens.